In the previous episode, starting from the recent situation in Iran, I shared with you China's cool, aloof non-alignment policy. I said that in this world, there are actually very few countries qualified to be China's allies. I also said that looking back over China's long history, alliances have never really succeeded, and cases of betraying allies are everywhere. So what about America's allies? Today, let's talk about that. Not long ago, something happened and it was quite important. Recently, Denmark, AUSLY, had its Ministry of Defense issue the toughest warning yet to the United States. If the US dares to invade Greenland, Danish soldiers may open fire first and ask for instructions later. The Danes also said, "We have the law on our side." Because back in 1952, Denmark formulated military regulations that include the following clause. In the event of an act of invasion, even if the relevant commanding officer has not yet been informed of a declaration of war or a state of war, the attacked unit must immediately enter combat without waiting for or seeking orders. How should we understand this? We all know that Denmark is a small European country, with a mainland area of 43,000 square kilometers and a population of about 6 million. By our domestic standards, it's basically equivalent to a prefecture-level city as a country. At the same time, it is a NATO member and, over the past several decades, has been one of America's most hardcore, ironclad supporters, the kind that follows Washington without hesitation. For Denmark to issue such harsh words toward the United States this time is truly unprecedented. So for the Danes to make such a blunt and tough statement is already extremely rare and unusual. And it's not just the Danish Ministry of Defense. What's even more crucial is that Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen's attitude toward the United States has also undergone a dramatic shift. How did she respond earlier? Basically, she hedged, dodged questions, spoke vaguely, and even joked about it, saying that Greenland being taken by the United States would be better than being taken by China or Russia. But recently, she stopped being ambiguous. On January 5th, just 2 days ago, she publicly stated that she believes Trump's talk of annexing Greenland is serious. She said that the pressure the United States is putting on Denmark is unacceptable. She also said that Denmark has made its position clear. Greenland cannot and will not become part of the United States, and she will do everything possible to defend Greenland. Her next words were somewhat softer. She said that both the United States and Denmark are NATO members, and that Denmark and Greenland should receive NATO's security guarantees. Why I say this part is a bit soft? Because everyone knows NATO is led by the United States. If the big boss, the US, were to attack its own junior partner, Denmark, then even if NATO didn't immediately collapse, it would exist in name only. Everything so far has been what's happening on the surface. Now let's talk about what's going on behind the scenes. Why has Denmark, this small country, suddenly become so tough toward the United States? In fact, Denmark's sudden change in stance and even its public declaration that it would not hesitate to fight if the US tried to seize Greenland reflects a major rupture between Europe and the United States. Recently, Europe's overall attitude toward the United States can basically be described as one of utter disappointment. It's a bit like how people look at a domestic abuser, especially after this incident. On December 29th last year, according to Putin's aide Shakov, Putin angrily called Trump that day and said that Ukraine had deployed 91 drones to attack his residence. After that, Putin told Trump that following this incident, Russia will reassess its peace stance. What does that mean? Because just the day before, Trump believed that although it had taken great effort, getting Russia and Ukraine to agree to a ceasefire was almost at the finish line. He had even invited Zelensky to meet at Mar-a-Lago. The talks were neither great nor disastrous, at least they didn't collapse on the spot. Trump was feeling quite pleased, even a bit like he was nearing the peak of his life. Germanic win science, about to win once again. But he never imagined that this high would last only a little over 10 hours before Putin made that phone call. The jug was practically in his mouth and suddenly it flew away. Trump immediately flew into a rage and began fiercely berating Zelensky. In front of reporters, he angrily said that Putin had informed him of the attack early that morning, and that he was extremely angry and didn't like this at all. He said that retaliation was one thing, but attacking Putin's residence was another matter entirely, and that this was not the right time to do such things. He was very angry about it. He even said, somewhat smugly, that luckily he had had the foresight not to send Tomahawk cruise missiles to Ukraine. Otherwise things would have become very serious. And then what happened? The Russia-Ukraine peace talks pushed by Trump were abruptly slammed with a pause button. He barely talked about them anymore. He probably knew that even if he did talk about it, it would be pointless. In fact, I had predicted this earlier. At least in the short term, peace talks between Russia and Ukraine are impossible. Because what Russia wants is something the United States cannot give and dare not give. All those previous peace talk maneuvers were nothing more than a show. So how did Zelensky and Europe react? Zelensky looked miserable and said none of it was true, that Ukraine had not sent any drones, and that this was something the Russians made up. He also said Russia was saying this to sabotage the results of US-Ukraine negotiations. But did his explanation still matter? No doubt it was useless. Because before Zelensky even spoke, Trump had already publicly berated him in front of the cameras. Trump had already said he was very angry at Zelensky, furious, personally furious. But was that the end of it? No doubt this incident triggered an unprecedented, massive rift, 甚至可以说是决裂 between the United States and Europe. Trump called Putin, didn't even bother to verify anything, and immediately lashed out at Zelensky. This made Europeans extremely angry, because Trump's attitude looked exactly like that of a domestic abuser, incompetent and submissive outside, then coming home to beat his wife and kids to vent his anger without asking any questions, just striking out. But for the time being, Europeans didn't yet have the courage to openly curse Trump himself. So with a belly full of anger toward the US, they could only curse Russia instead. The EU's foreign minister, Kaja Kallas, came out and said that Russia's claims were a deliberate attempt to distract attention and were groundless. She also said something very interesting. She said that Europe was alarmed by the international reaction to the attack on Putin's residence. Note carefully, she wasn't talking about the attack itself, but about the international reaction to it. Who does the international community refer to here? The United States. Although expressed very subtly, the European message was clear. You didn't even investigate, you just believed what the Russians said. So whose side are you actually on? In addition, something strange happened. Normally, when something big like this occurs, a bunch of European leaders, useful or not, would come out and chatter endlessly. But this time, everyone fell silent in unison. That silence was extremely eerie. It carried a sense of, you've completely broken our hearts. We don't even want to say anything anymore. Then things got even more absurd. On January 3rd, Trump personally ordered the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. In the past, Europeans had been extremely unfriendly toward Maduro, following the U.S. in freezing assets and refusing to recognize him. But this time, because it happened at such a sensitive moment, the capture of Maduro gave Europeans an overwhelming sense of cold disappointment. Under previous circumstances, given Europe's hostile attitude toward Maduro, the U.S. capturing him would surely have been met with applause and very American-style cheers. But after this happened, Europe fell into an unprecedented, eerie silence. The French even carefully chose their words and quietly scolded the United States. Human memory is usually short. If nothing else happened in the following weeks, people might have forgotten about it. But unexpectedly, at that very moment, someone who seemed eager to stir up trouble appeared. Who was it? Katie Miller. She is the wife of Trump's presidential aide and Homeland Security advisor Stephen Miller. She had also worked under Trump previously, before resigning. After the Venezuela incident, Europeans were already feeling deeply chilled. And then she went and poured gasoline on the fire. On social media, she posted a map of Greenland, colored entirely in the colors of the American flag. And she added a single word: soon. Under normal circumstances, a social media post by a White House official's spouse wouldn't be a big deal. But the timing was disastrous and it became a major incident. The moment this appeared, it was like poking a hornet's nest across Europe. A wave of people jumped out to furiously denounce Katie Miller. France's Foreign Minister Barrot said that the United States attacking another NATO country would be completely against America's own interests. There was a clear sense of, Trump, we may not dare to curse. But you, Katie Miller, we absolutely dare to curse. And there was even a subtle sense that cursing Katie Miller felt just as satisfying as cursing Trump himself. The Danes were the most active. Almost all visible officials came out to criticize her. Prime Minister Frederiksen was the harshest of all. She said that if the United States were to take military action against a NATO ally, then everything would come to an end. If you Americans dare to seize my Greenland, then forget NATO, just dissolve it. From that moment on, Europe and the United States would 彻底掰了, completely break apart. Everyone goes their own way. But was that the end of it? No. Just as Europeans were seething with anger, the United States sent yet another person to throw fuel on the fire. Who? U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. On January 6th, he held a closed-door meeting to brief senior officials, saying that the U.S. priority now was to find a way to buy Greenland from Denmark. Rubio evasively said that Washington had no plans to invade Greenland, and only wanted to make a deal with the Danes. He also said that the White House statement was intended to pressure Denmark into starting negotiations. Perhaps he thought that, under such intense pressure, he was reassuring Europeans, we don't plan a military invasion of Greenland, don't worry. But instead, it made Europeans even angrier. They asked, what kind of statement is this? What's the difference between force buying and a military invasion? At the end of the day, aren't you just relying on U.S. military power to seize Greenland from Denmark? It completely backfired. By this point, the situation was already extremely hard to contain. But just as the fire was raging out of control, yet another person appeared, making it even worse. Who? Trump himself. He directly contradicted Rubio, saying, who said we can't use military force to seize Greenland? As long as we get it, any means are acceptable. And with a loud boom, the flames shot into the sky. Now all of Europe is outraged. Denmark, France, Germany, Italy, Poland, Spain, and the United Kingdom issued joint statements saying that only Denmark and the people of Greenland have the right to decide this matter. Seizing the momentum, Denmark's Ministry of Defense publicly declared, if you Americans dare to invade Greenland militarily, we dare to open fire and go to war with the United States. Although these words were spoken by the Danes, they were in fact spoken on behalf of Europe. The message is simple. You dare to seize Greenland. You dare to start a war, I dare to fire the first shot. If Denmark were truly alone, without backing, would such a small country ever dare to say this? At this point, things have already reached the stage of seriously damaging relations. The 裂缝, the rift between the United States and Europe, is now enormous and extremely difficult to mend. Even if a Democratic president comes to power later, the chances of repairing it are slim. At this stage, we have to talk about what all this really means. It inevitably brings to mind one person, Zbigniew Brzezinski, the American strategist more than 30 years ago. He said that if the United States were ever forced into a worst-case situation, it could afford to lose other regions, but it must never lose Europe. because Europe and the United States share history and cultural roots, making communication easier. And fundamentally, the United States is just an island outside the Eurasian African supercontinent. To control the world, it needs a bridgehead. Other regions are unreliable. Only Europe is the most reliable. Therefore, controlling Europe is the cornerstone of America's global strategy, its hegemony. If the US loses Europe or falls out with it, a powerful anti-American alliance will quickly emerge across Eurasia, and the United States will be in serious trouble. So how should we understand this now? Now even the Danes dare to shout. If you Americans dare to invade Greenland, Denmark dares to open fire on you. And behind Denmark stands a whole group of European countries in support. Does Brzezinski's warning still matter? Can the United States still hold on to its European bridgehead? How should we look at this? Under Biden, things were messed up calmly and methodically with apparent confidence. Under Trump, things are messed up with random blows, east one hammer, west one strike. Different methods, same result, truly a case of Yi Shiyu Liang, two brilliant failures. Both are the kind of people who would make Brzezinski's coffin lid impossible to hold down. Side out, one can only say, the empire is at dusk. Chinese history proved long ago that allies cannot be relied upon.